You know that moment when something good starts happening and instead of feeling relief, you feel tension? A text comes in later than usual. Someone's tone changes by 1 degree. A plan seems too smooth, too easy, too calm. And before anything has actually gone wrong, your mind has already moved ahead of reality. It starts preparing for rejection, for loss, for disappointment, for the moment everything turns. From the outside, this can look like negativity, but sometimes it is not negativity at all. Sometimes expecting the worst is a hidden pattern built on traits that once protected you. Traits like sensitivity, pattern detection, emotional caution, a deep discomfort with uncertainty. And if you have lived with this pattern long enough, it can start to feel like your personality. Like this is just who you are. But that may not be true, because a lot of the time, you are not looking at a personality flaw. You are looking at a nervous system that learned to scan first and relax later. That changes how you move through everyday life. You reread messages, you replay conversations, you notice pauses other people barely register. You hear one small shift in tone, and your mind starts building a whole future around it. Not because you want to suffer, because your brain would rather prepare for pain than be surprised by it. This is why people who expect the worst often sound reasonable. They say, "I'm just being realistic." They say, "I don't want to get my hopes up." They say, "I've seen how this goes." And maybe part of that is true, but there is something deeper underneath it. Because this pattern is not just about thoughts, it is about identity. If you always expect things to go wrong, you start seeing yourself as the kind of person who has to be careful. You start believing you are only safe when you are one step ahead. So before you trust, you hesitate. Before you rest, you check again. Before you enjoy, you brace. And over time, this becomes exhausting. Not loud exhaustion, quiet exhaustion. The kind that lives in your chest, in your jaw, in your sleep. In the way even good moments never fully land. What makes this pattern so confusing is that it often comes from strengths. One hidden trait is heightened threat sensitivity. Your mind is faster than average at detecting what could go wrong. Another is strong pattern recognition. You notice details. You connect dots quickly. You remember subtle changes. You sense shifts before they are obvious. Another hidden trait is emotional responsibility. A part of you may believe that if you stay alert enough, you can prevent pain. That if you predict the worst early enough, you can soften the impact. And another is intolerance of uncertainty. For some people, uncertainty feels open. For you, it may feel sharp. Not knowing does not feel neutral. It feels dangerous. So the mind tries to solve that discomfort by filling in the blank. And because the brain prefers a painful certainty over a shapeless unknown, it often fills in the blank with the worst possible answer. That is why worst-case thinking can feel strangely stabilizing. It hurts, but it gives the mind something solid to hold. At least now there is a story. At least now there is a direction. At least now the danger has a shape. But here is the problem. The brain does not only respond to reality, it responds to prediction. And your brain is not a camera. It is a prediction machine. It is constantly trying to guess what happens next based on past experiences, emotional memory, and familiar patterns. So when something feels uncertain, the brain does not wait patiently. It searches its old data. It asks, what does this remind me of? What usually follows this feeling? What should I prepare for? And if your history trained your mind to expect disappointment, inconsistency, criticism, abandonment, or sudden change. Then your prediction system starts leaning in that direction automatically. Not because it is accurate, because it is practiced. This is an important distinction. Your mind does not always believe what is true first. It often believes what it has rehearsed most. That is why expecting the worst can feel immediate and convincing. The thought arrives, then the body reacts. Then the body becomes evidence. Your stomach tightens, your breathing changes, your chest gets heavy. And then the brain says, "See, this must be serious." So the cycle becomes very fast. Trigger, prediction, body alarm, belief. A small cue appears. Your brain predicts a negative outcome. Your nervous system reacts as if the outcome is already real. Then your mind uses that reaction as proof. This is also why telling yourself to just stop overthinking rarely works. Because by the time you are arguing with the thought, your body may already be living inside the prediction. And once the body is involved, the fear feels personal. It feels true. So the first reframe is this: you are not broken for thinking this way. You may simply have a brain that learned protection too well. What looks like pessimism can actually be adaptation. What looks like mistrust can actually be pattern memory. What looks like negativity can actually be a nervous system trying to avoid surprise. That does not mean the pattern is helping you now, but it does mean shame will not fix it. Understanding will. Because once you understand the mechanism, you stop fighting yourself blindly. You start working with the brain instead of against it. The first thing to practice is separating prediction from fact. When your mind says, "This is going to end badly," do not treat that sentence like a revelation. Treat it like a forecast. Not truth, not evidence, a forecast. This matters because naming a thought changes your relationship to it. Instead of standing inside the fear, you step half a pace back and observe it. If a friend has not replied all day and your mind says, "They're upset with me," pause there. That is not evidence. That is your prediction system filling in an empty space. The second thing is learning to reduce certainty. Do not force yourself into fake positivity. The brain usually rejects that. If you jump from "everything is going wrong" to "everything is fine," your nervous system may not believe you. A better move is softer. Replace certainty with possibility. Not "this will be a disaster." Not even "this will be great." Just "I do not know yet." That sentence sounds small, but psychologically it matters. Because anxious prediction feeds on certainty. It wants a fixed negative future. When you respond with flexibility, the brain has less rigid material to build on. Before a meeting, instead of thinking, "I'm going to embarrass myself," try, "I may feel awkward for a minute, and then I may settle." That gives your system room to breathe. The third thing is calming the body before solving the story. This part gets ignored a lot. People try to think their way out of fear while their body is still sending danger signals. But the brain is always reading the body. If your shoulders are tight, your breathing is shallow, and your jaw is clenched, the threat system interprets that as important information. So before you analyze, regulate. Exhale slowly. Unclench your hands. Lower your shoulders. Feel your feet press into the floor. These are not random calming tricks. They change the feedback your brain is receiving from the body. And when the body becomes less alarmed, the mind becomes less certain that disaster is near. The fourth thing is balanced prediction. When fear takes over, it narrows your imagination. It shows you one ending and calls it the future. Balanced prediction widens the frame again. Ask yourself 3 things. What is the worst outcome? What is the most likely outcome? If the worst happened, what would I actually do? This works because fear becomes more manageable when the brain has both probability and response. For example, if someone you care about seems distant, your mind may jump to, "They're pulling away from me." Maybe that is the worst outcome. But is it the most likely one? Or are they tired, overwhelmed, distracted, preoccupied? And if the worst were true, what then? You would talk. You would feel pain. You would survive that conversation. The mind often calms when it realizes pain is possible without being unmanageable. The fifth thing is small exposure to uncertainty. This is where real change happens. Because the brain updates through experience, not theory. You can understand your pattern perfectly and still live inside it unless your nervous system collects new evidence. That means letting some uncertainty exist without immediately trying to close it. Leaving a text unrechecked for a while, not asking for reassurance instantly, not rehearsing every possible failure before a simple task. These moments feel small, but they teach the brain something powerful. That uncertainty can exist without catastrophe. That a feeling can be intense without being accurate. That not every unknown is a threat. And slowly, the prediction system begins to update. Not all at once, quietly. You start noticing that some pauses are just pauses. Some silence is just silence. Some distance is just tiredness. Some uncertainty is just life being incomplete for a moment. And that is the deeper integration. Your mind is not a truth teller. It is a pattern teller. It takes old emotional data and tries to protect you in advance. So if you always expect the worst, it may be pointing to hidden traits that are more nuanced than they look. Sensitivity, awareness, pattern recognition, emotional caution. A nervous system trained to scan for change. These traits are not the enemy. They just need a better job. Because when protection becomes your default setting, it starts following you everywhere. Into relationships, into rest, into hope, into moments that were never dangerous to begin with. So maybe the goal is not to become someone who always expects the best. Maybe that is too forced. Maybe the real goal is simpler. To stop treating every unknown moment like a warning. To stop confusing familiarity with truth. To notice when your mind is using old data to predict a future that has not happened. And to remember in that exact moment that fear is not prophecy. It is preparation. Sometimes useful, sometimes outdated, but not always accurate. Maybe that is the thought worth holding on to. The part of you that expects the worst may not be trying to ruin your life. It may be trying, in the only way it learned, to protect something soft inside you. And healing may begin the moment you stop hating that part and start retraining it. Not with force, not with fake positivity, not with shame, with clarity. With repetition, with a little more space between the trigger and the story. Because peace does not always arrive like confidence. Sometimes it arrives as one small pause, one softer interpretation, one slower breath, one moment where you choose not to believe the first fear your mind offers. And over time, those moments become evidence too. Evidence that your brain can learn something new. Evidence that uncertainty is survivable. Evidence that you do not have to kneel to pain before it arrives. And maybe that is enough for now. Not certainty, not perfection. Just enough space to see that expecting the worst is not who you are. It is a pattern. And patterns, however old they are, can change.